I found out I was going to be a father from a voicemail I almost deleted. I was standing in the parking garage under the Hale Tower in downtown Seattle, thumb hovering over the screen, when the clinic coordinator's voice filled my ear. Calm. Clinical. Mr. Reyes, we have wonderful news regarding the transfer. The word wonderful didn't register. The word transfer did. My knuckles went white around the phone, and somewhere 3 floors up, the man who'd just walked out of my life was getting engaged to someone else. His name was Julian Vance. 2 hours earlier, he'd stood in that glass conference room and slid a ring across the table to Marcus Hale, smiling like he'd never once whispered my name in the dark. I'd watched through the door. I hadn't meant to. I'd come back for my jacket. Let me back up the only way I can, which is the way it actually hit me, in pieces, while my heart tried to climb out of my throat. 6 months. That's how long Julian and I had been planning. Not the wedding kind of planning, the other kind. The kind where you sit in a waiting room reading the same pamphlet 4 times, because neither of you can say, I want this with you out loud yet. We'd signed the surrogacy agreement together in March. His signature next to mine, looping and confident. Mine smaller, like I was apologizing for taking up the space. I'm Adrian Reyes, 31. I run a 2-man architecture studio that mostly means I do the work of 3 men and bill for 1. I'm not the kind of person things happen to. I make things happen slowly, stubbornly, with a level of spite my sister calls a personality flaw. So when Julian started pulling away in April, I told myself I was reading it wrong. Misreading blueprints is a fireable offense in my line of work. Misreading the man you love is apparently free. The voicemail kept going. The pregnancy is confirmed and progressing beautifully. Please call to discuss next steps with both intended parents. Both intended parents, I laughed. It came out wrong, more like a cough, and it echoed off the concrete and came back to mock me. The elevator opened behind me. I knew the sound of his shoes before I turned. Italian leather. The ones I'd teased him about. The ones he wore when he needed to feel taller than the room. Julian stepped out, phone already to his ear, and froze when he saw me. For 1 second, neither of us said anything. The garage hummed. A car alarm chirped 2 rows over. His eyes did that thing they always did when he was caught, flicking left, calculating an exit. Adrian. My name in his mouth still did something to me, and I hated that. I didn't know you were still here, clearly. I held up my jacket like evidence. Forgot this. He ended his call without looking at the screen. I was going to tell you. About Marcus. I wanted to do it properly. Properly. I tasted the word. You proposed to him in the room where we pitched the Donnelly project. That's a level of detail I'd call cruel if I thought you were smart enough to plan it. His jaw tightened. Good. I wanted him to feel something. I wanted at least one of us to be uncomfortable. And lately, it was always me. Don't do this, he said quietly. Marcus can give me things you can't. Things. I stepped closer, and to his credit, he didn't back away. You mean money? I mean stability. His voice cracked on the last syllable, and for a heartbeat, I saw the Julian I'd fallen for. The one who slept curled against my back like he was afraid of waking up alone. Then it was gone, smoothed over. We were never going to last, Adrian. You know that. The phone was still warm in my hand. The voicemail was still sitting there, unplayed for him, glowing like a live wire. I should have said it. We're having a baby. 4 words. They were right there. But he reached out and touched my arm. Gentle, the way you touch something you've already decided to leave. And something in me went cold and clear. Be happy, Julian. I shrugged his hand off. You're going to be so busy being stable. I walked past him toward my car. My hands were steady, I don't know how. Behind me, he said my name once more. A question this time, but I let the elevator doors and the distance and 3 months of swallowed words answer for me. I got in my car, I didn't start it. I played the voicemail again. Both intended parents, progressing beautifully. In 4 months, that confirmation would have a heartbeat. In 9, it would have my eyes or his, and a name neither of us had chosen, and no idea that on the day it became real, one of its fathers was upstairs sliding a ring onto a stranger's hand. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel and made myself a promise in the dark. He chose someone else without knowing what he was choosing against. He didn't get to find out on my terms. He'd find out on the child's. I don't know how long I sat there with my forehead on the wheel before someone knocked on my window. Not Julian. The knock was too patient for Julian, who knocked on things like they owed him money. I lifted my head. A man stood beside my car, one hand raised, the other holding two coffees from the cart in the lobby. Tall, dark coat. The kind of face that made you forget what you were about to say. I rolled the window down 2 inches, because I have boundaries even when I'm falling apart. "You've been parked here for 20 minutes, he said. Garage security flagged it. I told them I'd check before they towed a grieving man's car. I'm not grieving. You're sitting in a concrete bunker holding your phone like it bit you." He tilted his head. "I've buried people with less drama." I should have rolled the window back up. Instead, I asked, "Who are you?" "Marcus Hale." The coffee in his left hand suddenly made a lot of sense. So did the cold that climbed up my spine. This was him, the stable one, the ring man. The reason my morning had a before and an after. I got out of the car because I refused to have this conversation from a seated position. He was taller than me by an inch, which I resented immediately. And his eyes moved over my face with an attention that felt less like curiosity and more like assessment. "You know who I am," I said. "Adrian Reyes, the architect." He held out one of the coffees. "Julian talks about you, more than he thinks I notice." I didn't take it. He talk about me before or after he proposed? Something flickered behind his expression, too fast to name. He set the coffee on the roof of my car instead, careful, like he was putting down a peace offering he already knew I'd reject. "He didn't propose," Marcus said. "I did." The garage went very quiet. A pipe ticked somewhere overhead. "That's not what I saw. You saw a ring and a yes. You didn't see the 6 weeks before it." His voice stayed level, but his thumb pressed white against his own knuckle. "I'm not your enemy, Mr. Reyes. Whatever you think happened up there. I think a man I loved chose a checkbook over me. Correct me if the math is wrong." That landed. I watched it land, watched his jaw work around something he didn't say, and for one strange second I felt almost guilty, which made no sense, because this man had nothing I needed except his absence from my life. "You don't know Julian as well as you think," he said quietly, "and you've known him 6 weeks. Long enough to know he's running from something." He finally met my eyes full on, and the assessment was gone. What replaced it was worse. It was honest. "I thought it was you. Standing here, I'm starting to think it isn't." My phone buzzed in my hand, the clinic again. I silenced it without looking, but his gaze dropped to the screen, then came back up, and I saw the exact moment he filed the reaction away. This was a man who noticed things. I would need to remember that. "You should drink the coffee," he said, already stepping back. "You look like someone who hasn't decided whether to fall apart or set something on fire." "And which would you bet on?" The corner of his mouth moved. Not a smile, the blueprint of one. "Arson. You've got the hands for it." He walked away toward the elevator, coat shifting around him, and I stood there holding a coffee I never agreed to take, hating that the warmth of it through my palm was the first thing all day that hadn't hurt. I told myself it meant nothing. I was getting very good at telling myself things. I didn't drive home right away. I drove to my sister's, not because I'd decided to. My hands made the turns while my head ran the same loop. Marcus saying he's running from something. Marcus noticing the phone. Marcus betting on arson like he'd already read the part of me I kept blueprinted and hidden. By the time I parked outside Nadia's building, I'd argued myself into 3 different feelings and lost to all of them. She opened the door before I knocked. She always knows. "You look like you got hit by a truck made of feelings," she said. "I'm pregnant." The words came out flat and wrong, and her face did something complicated. You're going to need a full sentence." The surrogacy worked. Julian's, the embryo it took. The clinic called an hour ago. I walked past her into the apartment because my legs had decided standing was optional. And Julian got engaged this morning. To a man who buys coffee for strangers and bets on whether they'll commit arson. Nadia shut the door slowly. "Start over. Sit down." And Adrian. She crouched in front of me, hands on my knees, her voice gone soft in the way that scared me more than yelling. "Does Julian know?" The whole drive I'd been so sure of my answer. He'll find out on the child's terms. It had felt like strength in the garage. Now, with my sister's eyes on me, and a heartbeat the size of a grain of rice somewhere across the city, it felt like a fuse I'd lit without measuring the rope. "No," I said. "Adrian, he chose. He doesn't get to unchoose because the math changed." She didn't argue. That was worse. She'd just held my knees and let me feel exactly how heavy the thing in my chest had become. And somewhere in the silence, my phone buzzed a third time. And this time, the name on the screen wasn't the clinic. It was Marcus Hale. I stared at his name until the screen dimmed, then lit it again with my thumb just to make sure I wasn't inventing things. Marcus Hale, calling me. On a number I had given exactly one person in that building, and that person was Julian. And the math of how it had crossed the hall into Marcus' phone made my stomach turn over slow. Nadia read my face. Don't answer. So I answered, because my sister telling me not to do something has never once worked, and we both know it. How did you get this number? I said. A pause. The sound of a door closing on his end, shutting out the noise of the world he lived in. You left your jacket in the lobby. There's a business card in the inside pocket. I'm resourceful, not psychic. I looked down. My jacket was draped over the arm of Nadia's couch where I'd thrown it. The breast pocket was empty. I'd handed half my contact information to a man who collected information the way other people collected grudges. That's a felony-adjacent thing to do, I said. It's a card. You hand them to strangers professionally. His voice softened, and I hated how the softness reached through the phone and touched the base of my spine. I called because of the way you silenced that phone in the garage. 3 calls, same number. You looked at it like it was going to ask you for something you couldn't give. Nadia was watching me, mouthing hang up, and I turned away from her toward the window because I am a coward in specific, targeted ways. That's none of your business. No, he agreed. But Julian is about to be my business legally, and I have spent 6 weeks watching him flinch every time his phone rings. I'm starting to think the two of you share a ghost. The grain of rice, the heartbeat across the city. The thing I had not said in the garage because saying it would make it true in a room with the wrong man in it. There's no ghost, I said. You're a bad liar, Mr. Race. It's almost charming. It's Adrian. And you don't get to find me charming. You're marrying the man who left me in a parking garage. The silence on his end had weight to it. When he spoke again, the level voice had a crack in it, hairline. But there. I didn't know about the garage until I saw your face. I didn't know about a lot of things. A breath. He told me he was free. I believed him because I wanted to. Sound familiar? It did. That was the trouble. It sounded exactly like the conversation I'd had with myself every night in April, and hearing it in his mouth made him less of an enemy and more of a mirror. And I did not have room in my chest for another reflection of my own bad decisions. I have to go, I said. Adrian, don't call this number again. I hung up. My hand was shaking. I set the phone face down on the windowsill like that would keep it from ringing, and behind me Nadia said very gently, "You like the sound of his voice. I do not." You went to the window. You always go to the window when you're lying to yourself. I turned around. She was right, which is the most annoying thing a sibling can be. And I opened my mouth to tell her she was wrong anyway. And that was when the buzzer on her apartment went off. Not the phone, the door. We both froze. Nadia lives in a building with a security gate. Nobody gets to her door without being let through downstairs, and she hadn't buzzed anyone up. The intercom crackled. A voice came through it, distorted by cheap speaker but unmistakable. A voice I had spent 6 months learning and 3 hours trying to forget. Adrian, I know you're in there. Your car's outside. Please. Julian. My whole body went cold and then unbearably hot, the way it does right before you do something you'll regret. Nadia put her hand on my arm. I shook my head at her, one small motion. I've got this, though I had nothing of the kind. I crossed to the intercom, pressed the button. How did you find me here? You always go to your sister's. His voice broke on the word sister, and I remembered all the Sunday dinners, him charming Nadia, her pretending not to be charmed. Adrian, I talked to the clinic. They called me. They congratulated me. A sound like he was holding himself up against the door downstairs. They said both intended parents. So either there's a mistake, or you've been standing in front of me lying with your whole face. The grain of rice had a heartbeat, and now it had detonated 3 hours and 1 building too early in the worst possible way through a static intercom while my sister watched and the man Julian had chosen sat somewhere across town with a hairline crack in his voice. I let go of the button. Adrian. Julian's voice climbed. Is it true? Did you keep this from me? I looked at the button. I looked at Nadia. I thought about the garage, about be happy, you're going to be so busy being stable, about the promise I'd made in the dark that he'd find out on the child's terms, and not mine. The terms had just chosen themselves. I pressed the button and said the only honest thing I had left. Come up. The knock came faster than I expected. Stairs, not the elevator. He'd run. I opened the door and there he was, chest heaving, tie loose. The ring still on his hand, catching the hallway light like an accusation. He'd been crying or close to it, his eyes rimmed red, and the sight of him undone like that did something traitorous to me. Some old reflex that wanted to reach out and fix his collar. I put my hands in my pockets instead. Is it true? No greeting? No air left for one? Come in, Julian. My sister's neighbors don't need the show. He stepped inside. Nadia had vanished into the kitchen, which is her version of giving privacy while staying close enough to hit someone with a pan. The door clicked shut, and the 3 feet of carpet between us felt like a border I'd spent 6 months learning to cross, and now couldn't remember how the clinic said both parents. His voice shook. When did you find out? This morning, in the garage, about 40 feet from where you proposed to him. I watched that land, watched the color leave his face. I had it in my hand, Julian, the voicemail. I could have told you right there. Why didn't you? Because you'd already chosen. The words came out steadier than I felt. You said Marcus could give you stability. You said we were never going to last. A man doesn't say those things and then get to be a father in the same breath. That's not your decision to make alone. He took a step toward me, and the heat of him reached me before he did, that familiar warmth I'd slept against for half a year. We signed those papers together. Together, Adrian. You don't get to erase me because I hurt you. And you don't get to walk back in because the math changed. I heard my own line, the one I'd given Nadia, and it sounded thinner out loud, in front of the actual man it was about. Who told the clinic to call you? He blinked. What? They called you. They called me 3 times, and you once on the same morning, an hour apart. Clinics don't loop in a man who isn't on file unless someone tells them to. I stepped closer now, because I wanted to see his face when he answered. Did you call them? No. And I believed him because Julian lies beautifully about feelings and terribly about facts. And this was a fact. His brow creased. I thought I assumed you. He stopped. Then who? The answer sat between us unspoken, wearing Italian shoes. Julian saw me arrive at it the same moment I did. His jaw tightened. Marcus wouldn't. Marcus called me an hour ago, off a card I didn't give him. Marcus said you two share a ghost. Marcus knew exactly how to look at my face. My pulse was loud in my ears. Your fiancé is very interested in my secrets for a man who just got engaged. Stop. Julian's hand came up, pressed flat against his own sternum, like he was holding something in. He's not. He wouldn't use a... His voice cracked clean through. I don't know what he would do. I've known him 6 weeks. I said yes to a man I've known 6 weeks because I was scared, and now you're telling me he... He sat down hard on the arm of Nadia's couch. God, what did I do? And there it was. The thing I'd wanted in the garage, him uncomfortable, him unsteady, him finally feeling the weight. It didn't taste like victory. It tasted like ash. I crouched in front of him the way Nadia had crouched in front of me, and the symmetry of it nearly broke me. Hey, my voice came out gentler than I'd planned. Look at me. He did. Up close, his eyes were the same brown I'd memorized. And for one suspended second, the 6 months came rushing back. The good ones, the mornings, the way he'd hum off key in my shower and deny it. My hand had lifted halfway to his face before I caught it. We both noticed. The air went tight and warm. His breath stuttered. For one heartbeat, I thought he would lean in, and worse, I thought I would let him. That I would close those last inches and undo every clean thing I'd said today for the comfort of a mouth I already knew. I dropped my hand. No, I said quietly, we don't get to do that, not anymore. His face crumpled and reset. Adrian, the baby, is mine to protect first. You made yourself a stranger this morning. Strangers don't get keys. I stood, putting the height and the distance back between us, because crouching there I'd felt the pull, and the pull was a liar. If you want to be in this child's life, you earn it, starting with the truth. All of it, including whatever Marcus is to you that made you run to him in 6 weeks. Julian opened his mouth, closed it. And then his own phone buzzed in his pocket, loud in the quiet, and he pulled it out on reflex. I watched his face go white for the second time in 10 minutes. "What?" I said. He turned the screen toward me. "A message from Marcus, 3 words that rearranged the entire room," I told them. "Call him," I said. "Adrian, call him. Put it on speaker. I want to hear him say why." Julian's thumb hovered, shaking, then pressed. The ring caught the light again, and I thought about how heavy a thing it was for something so small. The line rang twice. Marcus picked up before the third. "You saw it." His voice came through the tinny speaker, calm as a man ordering coffee. "Good. I'd rather you heard it from me before you build a story I can't take back." "Why?" Julian whispered. "Why would you do that to me? To us?" A pause, and in the pause I heard him breathe, and something in the breath told me this was costing him more than the level voice led on. "Because you weren't going to tell him about the ghost," Marcus said. "And I wasn't going to marry a man who was using me to outrun one." Julian's face went rigid. "Don't." 6 weeks ago, you walked into my office to pitch a building and spent the meeting watching the door, like someone was going to walk through it. Marcus's voice stayed even, but the edges had frayed. "I asked you to dinner because I'm a fool who likes broken things. You said yes too fast. You always said yes too fast, to dinner, to the ring, to anything that would fill the space he left." A breath. "I called the clinic this morning because I found the surrogacy paperwork in your bag, Julian. Your name, his name. A child neither of you had told me existed, signed in March while you were already meeting me for drinks." The room tilted. I looked at Julian. "March," I said. "We signed in March. He wouldn't meet my eyes. You were seeing him in March." My voice didn't sound like mine. "While we were sitting in that waiting room, reading the same pamphlet 4 times. While you told me you wanted this with me." I felt the old wound tear open, the one I'd stitched shut every night in April, telling myself I was misreading the blueprint. "You weren't pulling away because you were scared, Julian. You were already gone. You signed a baby into existence with one man while you were falling into bed with another." It wasn't. Julian's voice broke apart entirely. "I didn't sleep with him until May, I swear it. But yes, I met Marcus in March. Yes, I sat in that clinic with you knowing I'd already started looking for the exit." He pressed the heel of his hand against his eyes. "I was a coward. I wanted the baby and I wanted to be saved from how much it scared me, and I couldn't hold both, so I split myself in 2 and gave each of you half." Marcus's voice came soft through the speaker. "And neither half is a whole man, Julian. That's why I told them. Not to hurt you. To stop you from doing to that child what you did to both of us. Make it choose between 2 halves of a father who can't decide what he wants." The honesty of it gutted me because it was aimed at Julian, and it landed in me too. I'd made a promise in a dark car that the child would find out on its own terms, and I dressed it up as protection. And it was the same cowardice wearing a braver coat. I'd been hoarding the secret, like a weapon for the satisfaction of choosing the moment. Marcus had taken the weapon out of both our hands. I hated him for it. I was also, in some buried place I'd deny under oath, grateful. "Why tell me your reasons?" I said to the phone. "You don't owe me anything." A silence. Longer this time. "Because you looked at that voicemail in the garage like it was a sentence and a gift at the same time," Marcus said. "I've spent 6 weeks loving a man who can't choose. I wanted to see what a man looked like when he already had." His voice dropped. "You scared me, Adrian. You still do. Drink the coffee." The line went dead. Julian sat there with the phone in his open palm, ring up, and for a long moment none of us moved. Nadia appeared in the kitchen doorway, no pan, just her hand pressed to her mouth. "He's right," Julian said, finally hollow. "I can't choose. I've never been able to choose. My whole life I just take the thing that hurts least in the moment." He looked up at me, wrecked. "I'm sorry. For March, for the garage. For making you carry this alone for 3 hours that felt like stop." I couldn't hear the apology, not yet. The wound was too fresh and his voice was too familiar. And I knew if I let him finish, I'd forgive him before he'd earned a single inch of it. And I'd promised myself, in that car, that forgiveness this time would be a thing he built, not a thing he was handed. "I need you to leave," I said. "Adrian, you signed a baby with me in March while you were planning your exit. I'm not going to set that down in one afternoon because you cried in my sister's living room." My hands were steady. They had no right to be. Go home, or go to Marcus, I don't care which. But you don't get to be forgiven and devastated in the same room. Pick one and do it somewhere else. He stood. At the door he paused, ring catching the light one last time, and said the thing I'd been bracing against since the garage. I'm going to be in this child's life, Adrian. I don't care what I have to earn. I'm not disappearing again. Then he was gone and the door clicked, and the only sound left was my own heartbeat. And the coffee Marcus had told me to drink sitting cold somewhere across the city, and I realized the man I should have hated most today was the only one who'd told me the whole truth. It was a stupid thing to fixate on with my whole life rearranged on my sister's carpet, but my mind did what it always does under pressure, which is grab the smallest solvable thing and hold on. Marcus had told me to drink it. The cup was still on the roof of my car, 4 blocks and a lifetime away, gone cold in the Seattle gray. Nadia put a hand on my shoulder. You need air. You've got that look like the walls are an inch closer than they were. She wasn't wrong. I took my jacket, the one with the empty pocket, and I went down to the street. And I told myself I was just walking. My feet, the same traitors that had driven me here, took me toward the water. He was already there. I don't know how Marcus knew the pier 2 blocks from my sister's place was where I'd end up. Maybe he didn't. Maybe a man who collects information also collects coincidences and calls them strategy. He was leaning on the railing in his dark coat, 2 fresh coffees beside him on the wet wood, looking out at the gray, like he'd been waiting long enough to stop pretending he wasn't. You followed me, I said. I waited for you. There's a difference. He held out a cup without turning. You never drank the first one. I'm told persistence is one of my flaws. I should have walked away. I took the cup. The warmth bled through the cardboard into my fingers, and it was the second time. Today his coffee had been the only thing that didn't hurt. And I was getting tired of pretending I didn't notice the pattern. You blew up your own engagement, I said, on purpose. For a man you've known 6 weeks and a child that isn't yours. I blew up a lie I was about to marry. He finally looked at me. Up close on the empty pier, his eyes weren't as certain as his voice. Julian was never going to be mine. I knew it the first night. I just wanted to be the safe harbor long enough that someone, anyone, would choose to stay. A breath of a laugh, bitter at the edges. Turns out I'd rather be the truth than the harbor, even if it costs me everything I was pretending to want. The wind came off the water and pushed at us both. A gull complained somewhere. My heartbeat had gone uneven, and I told myself it was the cold. Why me, I said. You keep circling back. Drink the coffee, you scared me, I waited for you. I'm a pregnant architect with the worst week of my life, and a child by your ex-fiancé. I am a catastrophe wearing a peacoat. You're the only person I've met in months who knew exactly what he wanted and chose it even when it broke him. He set his cup down, turned fully toward me. The 3 feet between us on that pier felt like the same border I couldn't cross in Nadia's living room. Except this time, the man on the other side hadn't lied to me once. You walked away from Julian in that garage with your hands steady. I watched the footage. Security flagged your car, remember? I saw you sit there and decide to protect something instead of yourself. His voice dropped. I've never been able to do that. I wanted to stand near someone who could. The space between us got smaller. I don't know which of us moved. Maybe both. His hand came up, slow, giving me every chance to step back and brush the hair off my forehead where the wind had stuck it. And his fingers were warm and careful, and they trembled, just slightly, against my skin. Don't, I said, but the word came out soft like I was lying to both of us. I'm not going to. His thumb traced my cheekbone once and stilled. I'm not Julian. I don't take the thing that hurts least. If you want this, you'll have to choose it with your open the way you choose everything. He was so close now that I could feel his breath, coffee, and cold air. And you're not ready. You've got a wound from this morning, and a man who wants back in, and a child who needs you clear-headed. I'm not going to be one more thing you grab because the floor moved. He started to pull back. And I, fool that I am, catastrophe in a peacoat, the man who'd spent all day being the strong one, closed the last inch and kissed him. It was brief. Cold lips going warm, his breath catching against my mouth, his hand sliding to the back of my neck like he'd been holding it in reserve for hours. I felt him say my name into the kiss without sound. Then I pulled back, because he was right, I wasn't ready. And being right is the cruelest thing a person can be on a pier in the rain. That was me choosing with my eyes open, I said, breathless, furious at the heat in my own face. For exactly 4 seconds, don't get used to it. The blueprint of a smile became the real thing. 4 seconds. I'll take it. My phone buzzed. I almost ignored it. Then I saw the name and the warmth drained out of me cold. Not Julian. Not the clinic. Nadia. And Nadia never texts when I'm a 2-minute walk away. She calls. 3 words, all caps, the kind of message that ends a tender moment like a slammed door. Julian collapsed. Hospital. I showed Marcus the screen because my hands needed something to do that wasn't shaking. He read it once and went still in a way I'd later understand. Not shocked, braced. The face of a man hearing a thing he'd feared, not a thing he hadn't known. Which hospital, he said. Harborview. Nadia would have gone with him if he collapsed nearby. I was already moving, coffee abandoned on the railing, and Marcus fell into step beside me without being asked. You knew, I said, the cold realization arriving as we hit the street. You read his face just now and you didn't ask what's wrong. You asked which hospital. His silence was an answer. We got into his car because it was closer and because my own keys were in a pocket I couldn't feel. He drove fast and clean through the wet streets, jaw tight, and somewhere around the second red light he ran. On a clear intersection, he spoke. Julian has a heart condition. His voice was flat, controlled, the voice of a man holding a dam shut with both hands. Cardiomyopathy, diagnosed 2 years ago. It's why he runs from everything. He told me 3 weeks in, after the second glass of wine, like a confession. Made me promise not to tell anyone. A breath. Including you. The street lights smeared past the window. My pulse was a fist against my ribs. 2 years. He found out, and then he met you. And he fell in love. And he panicked, because loving someone when your heart might give out at 34 is the cruelest math there is. Marcus's hands flexed on the wheel. He didn't leave you for stability, Adrian. He left you because he decided you deserved a future. He wasn't sure he could give. He picked me because I was safe. Because losing me wouldn't cost you anything. He was protecting you the only stupid, backwards way he knew how. The whole story rearranged itself a second time in one day, and this time it took my legs out from under me, even sitting down. Every cold thing I'd said in Nadia's living room replayed in my ears. A man doesn't say those things and then get to be a father. You made yourself a stranger this morning. Pick one and do it somewhere else. I'd flayed him for cowardice while his heart was quietly failing, and he was using the last of himself to build me an exit I didn't want. He signed the surrogacy anyway, I said, barely. Knowing his heart might, he signed it. He wanted a child he might not live to. He wanted to leave something of himself in the world that wasn't fear. Marcus pulled into the emergency bay, and then he got scared of that too. That's Julian. He reaches for the brave thing and runs from it in the same motion. You and I have spent the day hating him for the running. We forgot to credit the reaching. I was out of the car before it fully stopped. The waiting room was the particular hell of fluorescent light and bad chairs. Nadia stood when she saw me, her face pale, and behind her a doctor was already speaking. In the low, even tone, that means the worst is over but only just. He's stable, the doctor said, and I had to grip the back of a chair. Arrhythmia, stress-induced. We've adjusted his medication. He's lucky someone got him here fast. Her eyes moved between Marcus and me. He's asking for someone named Adrian, not Marcus, me. I looked at Marcus. Something crossed his face, swift and quiet and generous in a way that hurt to witness. He nodded once toward the doors. Go. He's been waiting 2 years to tell you the truth. Don't make him wait for the answer too. I went. Julian lay against the white pillows, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Wires at his chest, the ring gone from his hand, a pale band where it had been. His eyes found me and filled. You came, he said. Of course I came. I sat. I took the hand without the ring mark, because I am not made of stone no matter how hard I'd tried to be all day. Why didn't you tell me? 2 years, Julian, I would have, that's exactly why. His voice was thin but steady. You would have stayed. You'd have built your whole life around a man with an expiration date and called it love and never once let yourself grieve it until it was too late. A tear slid sideways into his hair. I couldn't watch you do that, so I made myself unlovable. I chose Marcus where you could see it. I said cruel, true things in that conference room, knowing you'd hear them as a choice instead of a sacrifice. His fingers tightened on mine. I am so sorry for all of it, for March most of all. I shouldn't have signed the papers when I was already planning to disappear. That was the most selfish, brave thing I've ever done, and I'd do it again because that baby is the only future I'm not afraid of. I sat there with his hand in mine and his confession in my chest and the taste of Marcus's kiss still on my mouth, and I understood that the shatter point of the day was not a betrayal at all. It was that everyone had been telling the truth in the only language fear let them speak, and I had to choose, not between two men, between the comfort of the wound I knew and the terrifying open future a braver man had built me an exit toward. Julian, I started, and the heart monitor beside him gave a single sharp stutter, and his eyes went wide, and the line on the screen jumped wrong, and the door behind me burst open with people in scrubs, shouting numbers I didn't understand. A nurse had my arm and was steering me out before I understood I was moving. "Sir, you need to wait outside, sir." And then I was in the hall with the door swinging shut on the alarms and Julian's wide eyes, and the hand I'd been holding a heartbeat ago. The corridor light buzzed. My own heart slammed like it was trying to do the work both of ours couldn't. I pressed my back to the wall because the floor had stopped being trustworthy. Marcus was there. He caught me by the shoulders before I slid. "Breathe," I said. "Adrian, look at me. Breathe." I breathed because his hands were steady and mine weren't. And I hated needing that and took it anyway. Through the small window in the door, I could see the scrum of scrubs. A body that was Julian's. The flat urgency of people who do this every day. Marcus stood beside me and watched too, and I felt the strange truth of it settle in my chest. Two men who'd spent the day circling each other over a third, now shoulder to shoulder, praying in the only direction left. He stuttered out a confession and then his heart tried to quit, I said. The words came out cracked. He waited 2 years and gave himself 4 minutes. That's the most Julian thing he's ever done. Marcus's voice was rough. His hand was still on my shoulder and I didn't shake it off. He'll fight. He reaches for the brave thing. We established that, and runs from it. Not from this, not from the kid. His grip tightened, grounding. You heard him. That baby is the one future he isn't scared of. A man doesn't quit on the one thing he isn't scared of. The door opened. The doctor came out, pulling down her mask. And her face wasn't the worst face. And I made myself read it the way I read a structural drawing, looking for the load that would tell me if the thing would hold. "He's back," she said. "We caught it. The arrhythmia is controlled and he's conscious." She exhaled. "He's stubborn. That helps more than people think. But I'll be honest with you both. His heart can't keep taking shocks like today. Emotional, physical, it doesn't care which. He needs calm. He needs a settled life. The next year matters enormously. A settled life, a calm future." The exact thing Julian had told me he couldn't give me and had run to Marcus to provide. The irony sat in my throat like a stone. She went back in. Marcus took his hand off my shoulder, slow, like he was returning something borrowed. "You should go to him," he said. I looked at this man. Dark coat gone rumpled, the certainty worn off his face. A kiss 4 seconds long still hanging unfinished between us. He'd exposed my secret to save my child. He'd driven through red lights for the man who'd chosen him as a placeholder. He'd told me the truth all day while everyone else hid behind theirs. And now he was handing me toward Julian with both hands. Because that was the kind of man he was. The kind who'd rather be the truth than the harbor, even when the truth left him standing alone in a hospital hall. "You're doing it again," I said, stepping back, being the safe harbor. "I'm giving you room to choose with your eyes open." A faint, exhausted version of the blueprint smile. "I told you on the pier, I'm not Julian. I won't grab you because the floor moved. And what if I'm choosing with my eyes open?" My pulse climbed. What if I've watched a man lie to protect me and a man wreck himself to be honest with me, all in one day, and I know exactly which one I want standing beside me when this baby comes? I stepped closer. The hall light buzzed. Julian gave me an exit 2 years in the making. I'm not going to spend my life walking back through a door he closed to save me. I can love him. I can co-parent with him. I can hold his hand when his heart scares him. But I am not going back. Marcus went very still. "You don't have to say that here." Not with him fighting through that wall. I'm saying it because of that wall. My voice shook and held. Today taught me people wait too long to tell the truth and their hearts give out trying. I'm not doing that. I kissed you for 4 seconds on a pier and called it eyes open. This is the rest of it. I reached out and took his hand the way I'd taken Julian's, except this time nothing in me went cold. I choose the truth. I choose the man who told it to me. For a moment, he didn't move. Then his fingers closed around mine, and his breath went unsteady, and the man who'd been braced all day finally, quietly, let the dam slip. You're a catastrophe in a peacoat, he said thickly. You said you wanted to stand near someone who knew what he wanted. I almost smiled. Stand still then. The door opened again. Nadia this time, eyes red, looking between our joined hands and our faces and the whole impossible day. Julian's awake, she said. He's asking for both of you. A pause. Together. He said, and I quote, "Tell them to stop being dramatic in the hallway and come decide how we're raising my kid before I flatline from the suspense." I laughed. It came out wet and broken and real, the first clean thing all day. Then I looked at the door and Julian's stubborn living voice behind it, and Marcus's hand in mine, and I understood the choice had never been which man. It was whether I'd be brave enough to build the strange, true, unfinished family the three of us had crashed into. I tightened my grip on Marcus's hand and pushed the door open. The door swung open and Julian was sitting up. Smaller against the pillows, wires still threading from his gown, but awake. And the first thing his eyes did was drop to my hand wrapped around Marcus's. He saw it. I watched him see it. And I braced for the begging, the manipulation, the competition, all the old Julian reflexes I'd spent the day learning the shape of. None of it came. What came instead was something I'd never seen on his face in 6 months of loving him. He looked at our joined hands and he exhaled, slow, and the tightness around his eyes loosened into something almost like relief. "Good," he said quietly. "He's steady. You always needed steady and I was never going to be it." "Julian," I started. "No, let me." His voice was thin, but it didn't waver. I had a lot of time in the last 4 minutes to think about whether I'd get to say anything at all. Turns out that clarifies things. He glanced at Marcus, and to his credit, he held the look. "I owe you the truth, both of you, without the cardiomyopathy doing the talking for me. I left you, Adrian, because I was a coward who dressed his fear up as a gift. I told myself I was setting you free. I was just running, and I let a good man stand in as my excuse." His throat worked. "Marcus, I'm sorry. You deserve to be chosen for yourself, not used as a wall to hide behind. You saw through me in 6 weeks. It took me 2 years and a flat line." Marcus's hand tightened in mine. "I knew what I was the whole time," he said, not unkindly. "I let myself be the harbor. That's on me too, still." Julian shook his head. "You blew up your own engagement to protect a child that isn't even yours. That's the bravest thing anyone's done in this entire mess, and I spent the morning thinking you'd betrayed me." A weak, real laugh. I had it exactly backwards. I usually do. I sat in the chair beside the bed, and Marcus stayed standing behind me, his hand finding my shoulder, present without pushing, steady the way he'd been steady all day. He didn't say a word about us. He didn't stake a claim or ask Julian to acknowledge anything. He just stood there being the thing he was, patient and unhurried, letting me run my own life in front of the man who'd nearly cost me the future I was only now learning to want. "So here's what I think," I said, and I felt the whole story turn under my hands, away from the romance drama it had been all day and toward the only thing that had ever actually mattered. "We're having a baby, the three of us, in whatever shape this is. I'm not your husband, Julian. I'm not going back through that door, but I'm not closing it on the kid either." Julian's eyes filled, and for once he didn't fight it. "You'd let me, with my heart the way it is. You'd let me be a father. Your heart's exactly why." I leaned forward. "You signed those papers because that baby was the one future you weren't afraid of. You don't get to be afraid of it now just because you survived to see it." "Calm life," the doctor said, settled. "So we settle. We build a calm, settled, ridiculous arrangement where a kid grows up with 3 men who all decided the truth was worth wrecking themselves for." I held his gaze. "That's not a consolation prize, Julian. That's the inheritance." He pressed the back of his hand to his mouth and nodded, unable to speak, and the heart monitor beside him beat slow, and even the most beautiful sound in the room. Names, he managed finally, wet and laughing. We're not naming my child something I have to apologize for at the playground. You signed away naming rights when you collapsed for dramatic effect, I said. And Marcus's quiet laugh moved through his hand into my shoulder, and Julian laughed too, and the three of us sat in that fluorescent room with the wires and the alarms gone silent, building the first careful beam of something none of us had the blueprint for. The doctor wanted him kept for observation. So we stayed, the three of us, and we did the unglamorous work that love actually is. We talked appointments. We talked the specialist Julian needed, and the second opinion Marcus already knew the name of. We talked about who'd be at the 20-week scan and how a child explains three fathers, and decided the child would explain it however it wanted, because the child would have the easy confidence of someone who'd never once been hidden. The clinic room 4 months later smelled like antiseptic and something warmer underneath. The particular hush of a place where good news lives. I lay there only metaphorically. The surrogate, a calm and extraordinary woman named Renata, who had become the fourth quiet pillar of this strange family, lay on the table with the gel cold on her belly, and the three of us crowded off the small dark room like men who'd forgotten how to take up less space. Julian stood on Renata's left, color back in his face, a new steadiness in him that had nothing to do with medication and everything to do with finally stopping the run. Marcus stood beside me, his hand at the small of my back, asking for nothing, present in the way he'd been present every single day since the hospital, patient enough to let me arrive at him on my own time. I had, slowly, with my eyes open, the way I do everything. The technician moved the wand, and the screen bloomed gray and shifting, and then the room filled with a sound, fast, insistent, impossibly strong for something so small, a heartbeat. Julian made a sound and pressed his hand over his own chest, over the heart that had tried to quit and hadn't, listening to the one it had made. Marcus's hand went still against my back, and I stood in the dark, looking at the flutter on the screen, and I felt the last cold thing in me from that morning in the garage finally let go. I had spent the worst day of my life believing the baby was proof of everything I'd lost. A man who chose someone else. A future that ended in a parking garage. A secret I'd carried like a wound. I had it exactly backwards. I usually do too. The baby was never proof of what I lost. It was proof of what I still had, what I'd built, what three frightened honest men had crashed into and decided to keep. Julian reached across and squeezed my hand, and Marcus's palm pressed warm and certain against my spine, and on the screen our impossible heart kept beating, and not one of us, for the first time in a long time, wanted to run. The child had never been the secret. The future was. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. If this story touched your heart, there's even more emotion, tension, and unforgettable romance waiting for you in the next one. Subscribe to Starlight BL Romance and stay tuned. A new story will be arriving soon beneath the starlight.